Hello and welcome to Positive Fandom. I am your host, and of course, we are joined today on the show with Catherine Cooke. Catherine, we're back reviewing another Star Wars show, and it feels like it's been so long.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, because we didn't review Kenobi, did we?
I don't think we did
No, I
review.
don't think we. I think we missed that one. Yeah, because I couldn't remember. I was on so many different channels reviewing that show that I just yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, this was quite a year for Star Wars show releases. You did mention Kenobi, and of course, before that, we had the Book of Boba Fett. So this was one of those years that we had such great expectations for Star Wars shows. Certainly, two very important characters in the IP, maybe two of the top 10 characters. People have been looking so forward to Boba Fett getting this series, and there were great expectations in it. Personally, it wasn't quite what I thought it would be, and a lot of us, I think, were surprised by that show. And then when it came to the Kenobi series, I also was maybe a little surprised in the direction they went with that. I mean, what were you thinking, Catherine? Did those two shows live up to your expectations?
No, because I still think that Disney is probably responsible, not Lucasfilm, for making the Boba Fett show to begin with. Because as we know, they thought about doing a Boba Fett movie. James Mangold confirmed that he was brought in for a meeting about it. And eventually they just decided, well, let's just, split the difference and just have a new Mandalorian character so we don't have expectations, which was a good idea. But when they put Boba Fett in season 2, I think the fan reception was so great that Disney probably said, okay, we got to give this guy a series. Because the fact that the same writers for Mandalorian season 1 and 2, which granted isn't perfect, but still very good, wrote the Book of Boba Fett, where like halfway through the series they completely abandon the protagonist, shoehorn in Grogu, completely undo the ending of season 2. It's like this reads like a Disney corporate decision to, oh, we need to sell more Grogu toys. And I thought it just kind of like the Ahsoka Luke scene, like it's like, oh, it's fan service, but why is it there? It doesn't really have any purpose. And so it just collapsed in on itself. And then Kenobi, if I'm being frank, I thought was atrocious. I mean, it was just so bad, and the writing was terrible. It's like none of it made sense. It's like the fact that they had so many writers on that show, and there were only two writers who were consistent through all 6 episodes. One of whom had not even bothered to watch Revenge of the Sith, and even bragged about it in an interview that he hadn't seen it. I'm like, what are you doing writing an Obi-Wan show with Anakin in that when you haven't even bothered to watch it? And who at Lucasfilm didn't task you? I mean, it's okay if you didn't see it when you were first hired, but obviously that should be the first thing on your docket. You got to watch that movie. You can't just read a Wikipedia summary of it. And I mean, yeah, as wooden as some of the acting and your writing choices, but it's still, you got to watch it. And it's like so many problems with that show, and it's just I couldn't handle it. I wish it didn't happen. It's just bad on so many levels, and which is why it was such a letdown, because Ewan McGregor was arguably the biggest highlight of the prequel trilogy in that role, and he did a great job, I think, from an acting standpoint in the series. It's just that the writing was just awful. So, which is why I was pleasantly surprised when I watched what we're about to review today.
Yes, and I certainly do share a lot of your sentiments about those two shows. Something that stuck out for me that I probably can't erase from my memory are what I like to call unforced errors in the show, especially for the Kenobi show, where we had situations where people were hiding under trench coats, which I think is maybe one of the worst mistakes they could ever do. They could easily edit that out and just have her appear in right there in the entrance, and we never even needed to see an explanation for how she even got out there. Truth be told, they managed to get her out there, but to make us believe that she could hide under a trench coat certainly wasn't anything I expected to see in a professional production. And another example might also be that checkpoint that you can walk around. Certain little things like that. Perhaps the biggest thing that I was most shocked by, Catherine, was that they didn't de-age Anakin in the scene. So, it looks like Kenobi is fighting a 40-year-old man.
Yeah, I wasn't as bothered by that. The things that bugged me was like the writing with the the Inquisitor character, whatever her name was, and it's like she struck me more as an ambitious cadet because you had the office rivalry thing going on with the other Inquisitors, which is weird. And as we saw in the Rebels series, the Inquisitors fear Vader, but they respect him and have no problem getting in the room with him if they need to. So the idea that she spent 10 years trying to find Kenobi just so she can get in the room with Vader makes no sense. And then the notion that like when she has her big breakdown with Kenobi, oh, I'm just trying to survive. Blah, blah. I'm like, you were literally about to torture a child, and now you want us to believe that, oh no, I'm just kind of. I'm like, it's so bad. And the fact that Bail Organa is still a senator, I mean, he could have just asked the Empire to help find Leia. He didn't know who kidnapped her. It's like, why are you asking Kenobi to abandon his important mandate? You were there when Yoda impressed upon you the urgency of this mission. Why are you sending a message on a recording device to Obi-Wan when you can't guarantee that he has that in his possession? And just the rebel path, and Leia, I thought was just, I mean, I think I read in an interview somewhere where they're like, oh, this explains why Leia named her son Ben. I'm like, is that really the thinking you had for why you chose to put her in this series? Like, what about all the fascinating stuff you could do with Obi-Wan? Because he, in the space of like a day and a half, he went from being a well-respected Jedi Master, General of the Clone Wars, to being public enemy #1 on the run. What does that do to you psychologically? And they touched basis on that in the Jason Aaron's Star Wars comics when Luke goes back to Obi-Wan's hut and he finds the journals of Ben Kenobi. And you see how he's been coping with it and how he's been trying to uphold his mandate. And there's none of that in this series. They don't dig into Obi-Wan's psyche at all, nor do they dig into Vader's psyche like Charles Soule did in the excellent Darth Vader Dark Lord of the Sith comic, which picks up after Revenge of the Sith. So here it's just like, and I still, people will say, oh, Obi-Wan, he kind of gave up like Luke in Last Jedi. And I'm like, well, I don't agree with the premise that Luke gave up in Last Jedi. I loved his arc in that movie, whereas here, Obi-Wan has effectively given up. Like, he finds a Jedi who's seeking his help. And it's like, well, we know from the journals of Kenobi and the fact that he's still upholding his mandate that he still believes in this stuff. So why is he just like being a total jerk hanging this guy out to dry? There's no character development there. And I understand why in Revenge of the Sith he left Anakin alive. He thought he was going to die. Understandably, he was emotionally distraught. But then in this series, you have him again, and you just let him go again. And it's like, what? I don't get what the impetus of the series was, because it didn't really tell a story. It's like there's a lot of plot, and like you mentioned, some ridiculous things that happened. But what was the point in the show? It's like they were marketing the whole thing around, oh, another showdown between Obi-Wan and Vader. And yeah, from a certain point of view, you could look at Vader's dialogue from the original movie when he says, when I left you, I was but the learner, I am the master. And that can still apply. You could still have them meeting up and have that not be retconned, but it didn't mean anything. It was like paying cheap fan service to, oh, look, they're going to fight again. And it's like, Obi-Wan, even in A New Hope, was shown to be a formidable fighter. And in this series, he was even worse. And like you could tell that Vader wasn't really trying very hard because he thought he was going to just do the guy in, and he doesn't. And for that matter, Vader's body language was all off. Like in the original trilogy, you could tell that he's got a very specific, like lumbering type presence. In this series, he moved very fluid. Like he's very, like it doesn't feel like he's actually in that suit. I admit that the scene where he's walking down the street, wrecking shop and killing the people was really badass. But it just, the body language was off. The writing, it just, none of it, it's like, it was a whole bleh. It's terrible. And now that they're teasing, like, I think McGregor teased at Celebration that they might do a second season. And for that matter, you had 6 episodes to tell the story of the Moses Ingram character, and her story just kind of, and she like literally disappears from the story. It's like she has that breakdown with Obi-Wan in the desert. And for that matter, why is she going out to find Luke anyway? It's like, you don't know, like that's not going to do anything. And you just said that, oh, I'm just trying to be good, all this kind of, then why are you trying to go out and kill Luke when Vader doesn't even know he has a son? So that's not going to help you in this. So what is this? Like, there's no plot or story logic whatsoever. It was just so bad. And that's why I was really kind of worried about Andor, but hence my extremely pleasant surprise by just how well the writing is on all fronts in this first 3 episodes.
Yeah, I share a lot of the comments that you made. I certainly do have a lot of the same feelings and concerns, and it really did make me very concerned because the trailer that they put out for Obi-Wan Kenobi looked good. It looked good. Mm-hmm. And we got the Andor trailer, and that looked even better. And I thought to myself, even though the Andor trailer looks amazing, so did the Obi-Wan trailer look pretty good, and we didn't quite get what I think the trailer promised as far as marketing it. But I feel, after seeing episodes 1 through 3 that the trailer for Andor does actually deliver what it promised so far. What did you think of that Andor trailer when you first saw it, Catherine?
I was surprised. I actually first saw it in IMAX when I went to see Rogue One a month ago because they brought it back out to promote it, and they also gave away these neat Andor posters for it. This
Yeah,
is
that's
this feels like
awesome.
doesn't this feel like a throwback to a classic Star Wars poster?
Yes, it does.
It
It's so
it was
cool.
such the trailer was great. It felt gritty, and it made me think back to Celebration Anaheim in 2015 when Gareth Edwards talked about what he wanted Rogue One to be, a gritty, really war film, and he showed that sizzle reel that was ultimately not from footage from the movie. I don't know where that came from. But then I saw the movie Rogue One, and while I enjoyed it a lot, it wasn't what he was talking about at all. It was like a classic, watered down, here, Star Wars story. And yet, watching that trailer for Andor and ultimately these 3 episodes, like this is what Gareth Edwards was talking about. Yes, there's a lot of Star Wars iconography in the episodes, but it doesn't feel like Star Wars in the sense that it's trying to do something more. I don't know if you'd say maybe adult, but it does feel more. It's trying to be grittier. It's like we're not going to get bogged down in fan service or stuff. I understand why they dropped 3 episodes at once because it has a nice slow burn, which I like. It's not trying to, it's not like She-Hulk where every week they have to have a new cameo to get you to keep watching. And she even breaks the fourth wall at one point in that show and even acknowledges, oh, this isn't going to be one. But here it's like we're just going to do good. We're going to trust our characters, something they should have done in the sequel trilogy that they didn't, hence The Rise of Skywalker. We're going to not worry about fan service like they did with the Book of Boba Fett, where we have to bring back Grogu and Luke and Ahsoka. No, they trusted the formula, and the fact that they have already been very detailed about how they have the whole 2 seasons planned out, and that each block of 3 episodes is going to take place in 1 year and tell its own story arc, which I think is really good, because it's like, okay, that means you actually sat down and planned this out well in advance, and you're not going to alter course at this point based on what fans might say. It's like you're actually taking your time on it, and I love that.
Yeah, and I do have to say that we kind of have been having the Mandalorian show being sort of this benchmark that we're holding things to, because it was perhaps the one that was the least disappointing in a sense. The Mandalorian is not the greatest show ever made. It isn't. I mean, it does do a lot of things right, but it certainly isn't the best show we've ever seen. But honestly, Catherine, I think that Andor, so far from what I've seen, is probably better than what I've seen in The Mandalorian for a number of reasons. What do you think about that? Do you think that Andor could possibly be the best show that we get from Disney Star Wars so far?
If it keeps up like this, yes. Because when season 1 of Mandalorian dropped, the first 3 episodes I thought were very good because it was written in the similar fashion to Andor, where it's an overarching story. And what it didn't, the first 3 episodes didn't feel as episodic. It's telling one, like the first act of a movie, if you will. Whereas after that, the 4th episode and beyond, it's just very episodic, one, adventure of the week type thing. And they did the same in season 2. Whereas here, it feels like they're telling a movie. Like this is act 1. And the fact that each block is going to tell a different story. Like next week will be, or the next 3 weeks, I guess, because they're going to go back to doing just 1 episode a week, will be like act 2. Then we'll get to act 3 and so on. So I think if they keep this up and stick to their word on it, I think it could easily be the best Star Wars show that they've done so far for on the live action side anyway.
Yeah. And it's not a spoiler to say that we know that the story is about Andor and the rebels. So we already know that this is what this story is about. Something that I have been concerned with, and I think for a good reason, was the idea of how the rebels were going to get Andor to kind of fight for them, to be on their side. And I was really concerned about the manner or the way they were going to treat this in the story. I certainly don't want to see Andor kind of be a pushover. And I don't think we're necessarily seeing him that way. I think he has gone along on the ride with the Skarsgård character because he has to. He has to get out of there. He's doing this. But I kind of made a joke saying that, he is going to, at the very, moment that he gets the opportunity, try and steal that ship from Skarsgård and get the hell away from Skarsgård and go on with his life to whatever he wants to do. What do you think about Andor's backstory so far? Because that's kind of where it does. We do get a lot more information about Andor in particular. What did you think of that backstory? Does it sound cliche? Does it sound good to you? What are your thoughts of his backstory?
So I thought it was kind of interesting that he comes from a primitive society, and the way that they discover the mining vessel and the mining operation, he gets rescued, and it's like, okay, that's kind of neat, because I could see why he might feel like a fish out of water, because he's just been taken from everything, and obviously he was still old. Like, he was probably like what, 7 or 8, or maybe in the flashback, so he's still old enough to remember that life. But he clearly loves his adoptive mother and gets along with her. But so I didn't have, it's clear that they're going to keep telling that story and moving along. So I expect we're going to get more flashbacks, and that it's probably going to lead somewhere, because the fact that, like, they had that big scoping shot of the mining operation, like, this is supposed to mean something, it's a big deal, and then it, like, cuts to black till we get to the next episode. I'm like, okay, so the fact that she saved him from us, there's something significant about this. I don't know what it is yet, but we'll probably get to it at some later date. So I like that that's kind of being spooled along. But in terms of his character, like you said, he might steal the ship from Skarsgård. I love that in the first episode they have this parallel scene with the opening of Rogue One, where he meets the informant, and because the informant is injured and can't go with him, and he's too panicky and obviously will break under pressure, he shoots him, and he feels bad about it. Whereas in this series, he goes to the brothel, which, wow, we have that in Star Wars, cool. And he's looking for his sister, and these guys pick a fight with him, kills a guy in self-defense, and the fact that he just murders that guy execution style, I gasped out loud. I'm like, oh fuck, because unlike the Rogue One situation where he kills the guy and it's like you can tell he's conflicted about it. Here it's like, no, he's just gonna, I know you're done. I'm just gonna do this just because. Like, he didn't need to do it, but he did it anyway. And as we see, it doesn't really get him out of trouble, because he's still being hunted by the cops, because he left the bodies there and other people saw him there to place him at the scene. But it's like, man, this guy's like vicious. And it's like, so yeah, you're right. I think he could try and steal the ship from Skarsgård at the first chance he gets. So it'd be interesting to see where that goes, because also in Rogue One, the fact that Cassian is like in the war room with Mon Mothma and Bail Organa means he's got some clout with them. So I think part of the series is going to show how he earns that clout, because clearly that's a very exclusive club to be in, and to be tipped off that an Imperial senator is a member of a rebel alliance, it's like, geez, they obviously really trust him. So it'll be interesting to see over the course of the series how he builds that trust. And as we saw in Rogue One, the rebels were already an alliance at that point, where so far we're not really sure yet in this series if is it an alliance yet, or it's still a little faction. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But I love that this guy is as vicious as he is, because it makes it unpredictable. I'm like, I don't care that I already know that he's going to die at the end of Rogue One. There's so many more interesting things you could do with characters and to create drama and suspense other than, killing them,
Absolutely. And, of course, one other thing that I want to point out about this character is, or at least it appears that it seems like he's managed to keep himself under the radar. And when I say under the radar, I mean, perhaps he hasn't registered, right? There's this, when the Empire takes over, everybody has to register. And they know every single person, in every planet in the galaxy, and the Empire is, they've got the machines going and they're counting the revenue, how they're going to make best use. Do we want these people to be minors? Do we want to enslave these people? All sorts of plans and things, but everything hasn't been executed yet. It's early days in the Empire. Catherine, if it is true, and I'm not quite sure if Andor is off the radar, how can he keep off the radar when we know it's maybe one of the most difficult things for anyone to do? Certainly the average person couldn't really do this, could they? Because the Empire would have this push for everybody to make sure everyone knows who you are and where you're from. How do you think he's managed to do that? Because I don't think Marva is off the radar. I think people know who she is. So how come it seems like possibly Andor might be off the radar? They don't have a recent photo of him, remember? What do you think about that?
One, I think it's a combination of him being a con man, and he's probably good at coming up with fake documents or the like, and the fact that she probably never registered him in any fashion, because she basically, I mean, yes, she rescued him, but technically kidnapped him or whatever from that planet. And, she was very afraid of them finding out where he came from, which is further indication there's something special about it. So I would imagine that she probably had something to do with maybe not register whatever fake identity she gave him, or what she named. I guess she's the one who named him Cassings. His name was Casa, and she just expanded upon it there. So I'm guessing that she sort of impressed some of those ability, taught him some of that stuff. And like he says to Stellan Skarsgård, you just walk in like you belong. And so as long as he can kind of, walk the walk, talk the talk, people aren't going to think twice about it. But he's I think he's very good at being very covert about about everything that he's been doing.
Yeah, and I would also, and I'm not necessarily going to say I'm assuming this because we know Marva clearly is a very skilled woman, along with the man who was with her when she discovered, uh, Cassia. The man, I think he was in Snatch. I kind of recognized him. I said that's one of the guys from Snatch. And we've seen a lot of actors in this show that are famous from other movies. Marva is obviously someone who has gone to other multiple planets in the galaxy scavenging, which is a popular employment at the time. So it's not so far fetched that she would be doing that. But is it okay for us to assume that Marva continued to take him on trips where he learned how to pilot, learned how to scavenge, and somehow perhaps became her protege in a way?
Well, I think that's also because of the fact that she's very afraid of them finding out where he came from. That she's deliberately teaching him these things so that he could stay, a few steps ahead of the game. To avoid being caught. She clearly loves him, and she's like, when the cops come and they start grilling her about it, she's not gonna budge. And whereas Cassian, it's like he's got to, I think that's what it is. She's taught him this because there's something about that planet that he came from that's special. She knows that if she were to tell the cops or any type of authorities that, yeah, she rescued him, they would just say, oh, you kidnapped, as an excuse to, lock her up or whatever and try to apply the pressure. But I think she just basically taught him how to do all this stuff.
Okay, good. And I felt that same way. And I know people were questioning how did he become this? And Marva, we don't know much about her just now, other than that she did rescue him. But she herself clearly has some incredible skills.
Yeah,
Is
I
it
can't remember. Was she a part of was she a survivor of the crashed ship, or did she just happen upon it as a scavenger?
She happened upon it as a scavenger with her friend, the guy from Snatch. I don't remember the actor's name, but yes, they're scavengers. And, like, we got 2 minutes to get out of here. We have 30 seconds to get out of here. And she's like, I've got to take this kid with me. And so, of course, in the story, she takes him home. She doesn't just take him with her. She adopts him as part of her family. So that's very important. Now, it is true that Cassian Andor is what you would call a character that has a lot of charisma. Maybe he has women everywhere. He's charmed people out of money. He's done a lot of things like this. Has being exposed to this lifestyle with Marva made him into this person? Or do you think this was something he did on his own volition, Catherine, maybe because he has plans to do something else with his life?
Well, I think kind of like the flashback showed, he kind of went into that ship and snuck around on his own volition as well. So he's kind of got a little bit of a mischievous kind of aura about him, combined with what she's been teaching him. And again, he tells Stellan he's just here to sell the thing, and Stellan's a lot smarter about it. He's going through all the like he's booby trapped the place in case something bad happens. It's like, we got to talk about this, that, and the other thing before we make this deal. And Cassian's like, dude, take it or leave it. I don't care. It's not my problem whether or not it works. So he seems at this point to be a bit short-sighted. Like, he's using his skills to con his way through life, but so far it doesn't feel like he has any grander ambition, so to speak. Even though he says in Rogue One that he's been in this fight since he was 6 years old. And okay, from the first 3 episodes of Andor, it seems that the fight from his perspective is just, he doesn't like the Empire, so he's going to con him every chance he gets. But it's not like he's a foot soldier in anything yet. It seems like Stellan is probably going to be the one to, I don't know, rein him in or like school him. I'm like, hey, this is what's really kind of like Jyn Erso. When Saw Gerrera asked her, you can stand to see the Imperial flag waving everywhere. She's like, it's not a problem if you don't look up. And I think similarly, you're going to see something between Stellan and Cassian because, Cassian's just, I'm one job after the next. I'll go to the next score. Whereas Stellan's obviously got a much bigger, grandiose plan. So I think we're going to see like a sort of a parallel relationship there starting to build.
And, it is very interesting. I don't think Marva leaves the house anymore, which is fine. She's an older woman. She's home with the adorable robot that they have that takes care of her and has a great personality. Certainly a robot that I enjoyed seeing. And you did mention the Skarsgård character now coming into play. And perhaps it does seem very clear that he is trying to influence Cassian to join the rebels. I think it's interesting that they decided to show this relationship of, and I kind of had been exploring it and thought they're showing an older man kind of guiding this younger man. It's not his child, but he's kind of being like a figure to him that Andor seems to need right now. I really think it's lovely that they decided to show what could potentially be one of the most important people in Andor's life at a time when he needs someone, because right now he's at a point where his life seems pretty stagnant. Nothing new's happening. He doesn't have anything perhaps that's even inspiring him to challenge himself. And Catherine, we can't ignore that when he was in that hangar with all those engines, which was one of my favorite scenes with all the engines kind of falling down, Andor was willing to actually risk his life. He actually had more enjoyment trying to get that unit back. That I think it's like an N9 unit. He was more interested in trying to get the unit back. Meanwhile, Skarsgård was like, no, forget about the unit. He doesn't realize that Skarsgård just doesn't even care about the unit. He's just using it to even meet him, to vet him into this. I think that it's the attention to detail is incredibly important in this. When Skarsgård lands on the planet, there's a man who's on the like transporter ship, a shuttle. Yeah, I guess it is a shuttle. Who kind of chats him up and says, well, hey, how are you, man? Do you come to the planet a lot? If you want to go out for drinks, this guy's really chatty, but he wants to find out who this man is, because that man knows everybody who lands on this planet. And maybe this is the first time he's seen Skarsgård. So he's like, I got to find out who this guy is. I'm in propulsion. What do you do? And, they thought about very specific things, making him a believable character, wanting to find out what Skarsgård is up to. He probably knows that Skarsgård is not a dealer.
Right, because no sooner than he tried to make the deal with him, Skarsgård's only interested in meeting him because of the fact that he was even able to steal this thing. And it's like, how do you do it? Oh, you just walk in like you belong, blah, blah, blah. And Andor's telling him that with a little bit of swagger, like, oh, haha, and he's still not picking up on the fact that, no, man, I need you for this. And it's not until shit hits the fan and they're on the run that he realizes, oh, he's actually interested in me for something. So I guess I'll come along and see what's going on. And when he meets those other people, like you said, oh, I'm in jet propulsion, I'm in that. And Andor's like, oh, well, I'm kind of, con man, or because the only thing that seemed to be going on with him before he met Skarsgård is that he was looking for his sister. So
yeah. And so, I have to ponder to myself at least a little bit that, Andor kind of needs this to happen now in his life. And, the fact that he was willing to risk his life to get that unit back just shows that, it's not even just fearlessness. I also think it might be a little bit of foolishness. And, I think that he's in a position we saw in the beginning of the show where I think when he killed that guy, it was a mistake. I'm not saying that he didn't have to do it. I'm saying that it was a mistake and he didn't want to have to make that mistake. It was either the guy or him, right? He had to make a decision.
Yeah, like he said, he didn't intend to kill the guy at first. It was an accident, and then even the guy's partner realizes, oh man, we really stepped into this, and he apologizes. He's like, look, I'll back up. I'm not gonna do anything. And I believed him when he was saying that. But Cassian thinks about it, and he's probably thinking to himself, yeah, you mean it right now because I got the gun and I just killed your friend. But once I leave and the cops show up and start investigating, you're gonna rat me out. And he does it. And that's leads into another subplot I thought was fascinating, where the cops aren't really pushing this very hard, but you have that young, ambitious kid. He's like, no, I want to solve this. It's up to me. Somebody killed our friends. We got to figure out who it is. And yet, I like that through that little that side story, he realizes he's not really skilled for this. He's in way over his head. And the Alex Ferns character, his partner, does not underestimate Cassian. He's like, no, 2 of our guys are dead because they underestimated this clown, and we're not going to make that mistake. And I like how he's kind of taking command, and because, yeah, we're rooting for Cassian, but this Alex Ferns character, I can't remember his character's name, but it's not like he's a bad guy. He's just doing his job. He's like, no, this guy killed our part. We have to find him. And that was another nuance to this character that I haven't seen in like side nobodies in these Star Wars shows that they're adding here. It's like a whole other storyline. I don't know the actor's name who played the ambitious kid who's like, oh, I'm gonna get. But seeing him kind of just totally have his like little meltdown where he just doesn't have a grip on anything, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And it speaks to the notion that the Empire and all of their subsidiary companies just promote from within like nepotism, loyal. Oh, you're loyal? Sure, you can have this job, but you're not necessarily skilled for it. And like we saw in the sequel trilogy where Kylo and Hux are clearly not qualified for the positions of power they have, but that was Snoke's intention because they're easier to manipulate. And you're seeing an extension of that here, where you have like these people who are just like, we got to like, what's going, like that's how which plays into how Cassian was able to steal that thing in the first place, because he says they're not the sharpest tools in the set. Yes, they're formidable when they come in large numbers and they have weapons, but I mean, you look at the history of Star Wars and how long the other Sith empires and Jedi empires lasted. Palpatine's lasted 24 years, which is nothing, like a blip on the radar, because he's centralizing too much. And so it'll be interesting to see what type of cons that Cassian pulls with the Stellan Skarsgård. I can't remember. I can't believe I forgot his name already. But what kind of cons they pull going forward in this series?
Well, it is interesting. And, I agree with you. That lieutenant, I'm going to call him a lieutenant, who's disobeying his commanding officer, reminds me of, you remember Aliens? There was a lieutenant who was inexperienced. And as they're going down onto the planet, Vasquez says, "Hey, how many jumps have you been on?" And he's like, "I've been on 23, 22 simulated, and one other, including this one." He reminds me so much of this character, but the difference between the character in Aliens and the character here in Andor is that the character in Andor has that, master sergeant who's egging him on, saying, "You know what we need to do, son. You're the one with the power, but I'm going to tell you how you're going to execute this. We need to be more heavy-handed when we see people doing this stuff. And I don't like it that they're letting people get away. And I know you don't like it too." Definitely boosting his desire to be more ambitious. However difficult that may be, they certainly are going to notice him now after everything that's happened. But I think it's interesting that Marva trained Cassian to stay under the radar, to go in, get out quick. And now you have somebody who's essentially, probably in some cases, going to tell Andor to walk right in the front door. This is a very interesting switch. And I think that because we know that he's questioned him about, how did you wear that uniform? How did you get in there? And he knows that Andor is willing to walk through the front door. He can request perhaps maybe the most difficult and impossible assignments from Andor. Are we going to be seeing the impossible in this series?
I think so, because on the one hand, yes, I think that Stellan's going to teach Andor a few things about being more heady about where he's going with it. But on the other hand, Stellan obviously has some things to learn from Andor as well. And it makes me wonder, because we've already told the story of how they stole the Death Star plans. And that was specifically the first victory that the Rebel Alliance had against the Empire. So that says that whatever's going to go on in these 2 seasons of the show is not a Rebel Alliance victory. They're doing something, or they haven't told us what, because obviously Stellan has some type of con in his head that he wants to pull off. We don't know what it is yet, and we know that Stellan is not in Rogue One or in the other series. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to die. There's all sorts of other things you can come up with. It's a big galaxy, But I am kind of intrigued as to where they're going with this, and that interesting relationship they've already set up. And what's going to go on with the sister, even, because she's kind of trying to figure out, "Oh, Cassian, what kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into now?" And I like that her boyfriend kind of sold him out, not because he was being like mean or a jerk. He didn't want his girlfriend to get caught up in Cassian's bullshit, and he didn't. And then when he saw that those guys were being a lot rougher and a lot more, jackbooted thugs, if you will, he's like, "No, you can't do this." And then they murdered him for it, So, and that's another great little bit of nuance. It's not like they just found out that he did something because he was trying to help her. Very brief little character moment, but a good one, And that's just the things I haven't seen in the other Star Wars shows for these small supporting roles. So I like that we're getting that in Andor, and it makes me excited for where the series is going.
It really makes me excited too. And I do understand that a lot of people felt that the series had a slow pace to it. I think that timing is everything when you're telling and perhaps what might be an epic story. And, these first 3 episodes focused on Andor. And now we're going to be seeing another person introduced in episode 4. But I'm glad that they released these 3 episodes, Catherine. It felt like a pilot to me. It felt like a pilot movie. We understand what they're trying to tell us. But I guess it is a little bit darker and grittier. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what I was expecting, but I think there are things beneath the story that are evident. For example, the citizens in this planet are on high alert. And I think it's very interesting that they chose to communicate with each other either in person. You didn't see any of them necessarily, excuse me, picking up a communicator and talking, except for Cassia. And he was kind of chastised for that. Don't use anything you don't have control over. But everybody else there seems like they They went
And the fact that they even acknowledge that makes me get, again, the Obi-Wan series, Bail Organa, what are you doing using a device? It's like, you know, it's like these people on the ground are a lot smarter because they're like in the fight every day, so to speak, you know?
They also are dealing with, high commodity goods, maybe the most desirable goods in the galaxy, where the man says, if you can't get it here, then it's not worth getting. That also makes me wonder, well, not just in parts, but it makes me wonder why he's still having difficulty finding his sister. The clues should be there. This is where you would find the person who could locate your sister, right? Which also makes me think that perhaps the sister doesn't want to be found. So that's something for a later date, and we can talk about this certainly when and if it does come up again in the story. But I can't help but wonder about, the reason and the choices they made, for example, to have this alarm system that's not electronic, Catherine. This is a manual alarm system that everyone can hear. And I don't even care about the intimidation and the smack talk that Marv is like, it sounds intimidating, when it stops. And I just thought it was really funny. She got over on sort of like a lot of the inexperienced officers and soldiers there. But what it told me is that even the people in this planet know that they have to do everything to communicate so that they're not monitored. After all, we know not just Cassia, but perhaps a lot of other people on the planet are doing underhand deals. Things are left on ships, on planes, on ships on purpose. Different things are left there. And we can kind of see a little bit of this, Catherine, when it is true that he asked his friend in the junkyard. That's probably one of the best jobs that you can have on that planet. Probably a very valuable job because you get eyes on the commodities that are coming and going. But more importantly, he tells his friend, look, I need to get the hell out of here. Help. I need to get this man knows who he has to go to get out. But not only that, there's that incredible scene, Catherine, when one of the guards is told to go back to that ship, fly it off of the planet. And I did not suspect it was booby-trapped, Catherine, but boy, it was satisfying to see this scene. He knew exactly what to do. I have a feeling that man in the junkyard knows a lot more than what he's letting on. He might even be in cahoots with the rebels. So this is something that I think going forward is very important, because the rebels have to get parts and things from people. How did this woman know about Skarsgård to begin with? I think that the rebels have a presence on this planet beyond Skarsgård to monitor who comes and goes and what equipment they could use that people might not miss or can buy underground. So maybe that's another reason why they communicate with this system that makes so much sense. You don't want anybody monitoring you if you can get away with it. Now, the other thing that I was going to say is this is a mature show. The woman that Tim is with, she's doing a hookup. It's a hookup. She says, are you available tomorrow night? And I kind of made a joke about how, of course, he's available tomorrow night. He's going to cancel whatever he had going on. And make sure he's available, right? And then we actually see them in bed. And we saw Anakin and Padme in bed. So this isn't the first time we've seen anyone in bed. But maybe I think that what they're trying to say is that we're getting back to a story that is maybe more realistic. People will have relationships. People are going to have they're going to have such strong desires that they're willing to call in the bad guys, knowing how much trouble it's going to cause on the planet, especially a planet that wants to be under the radar, right? As I said, they don't use communications, but he went and sent an electronic communication to get them there as soon as possible, hoping it would push Andor. These things never work out the way you want them to, do they? That's not Tim's plan. Tim thought that things were going to work out fine, only to find himself, being shot sort of unnecessarily, right? They could have subdued him, and then that.
Yeah, and I like that you even see the look in their eyes when they shoot him, that they're kind of nervous. Like they're clearly people who have no business being given a badge and a gun at this point, and they're like, and then they just kind of run away sheepishly and leave her there kind of cuffed. It's like, you left a witness. And granted, I assume there's a lot of corruption, so it's not like if she filed a complaint, it would go anywhere. But still, it's like the word's going to spread, you know? So especially like you said, on a world where everybody's lying low and has this interconnected network that's not electronic, and everybody's watching each other's backs, and these these jackbooted thugs are just ignorant to all of this, and it's like this isn't going to end well for them. Or like like when Cassian even confronted the cop who was leading the investigation, puts a gun to his head, but he actually decides not to kill him. I thought, okay, it's like this time he's not going to do. It's like, oh, I don't have to do it, and it's true he didn't. He's just like this guy's obviously incompetent, but it's like, well, the other people here, especially now that they've seen that, okay, you just murdered a guy you murdered your own informant for no reason. That's not going to earn you any favors in getting informants in the future. And now she's going to start telling tales about them, and so it's like, here we go.
I mean, the best thing that we can hope for, at least on the planet now, is that somehow they don't connect him with, I think her name is it Dix or something like that? Or
was it Bix? I can't remember what her name is. I can't believe I can't remember the character. Probably because of their weird Star Wars names. I just don't remember. I remember this, the Skarsgård's character's name starts with like letter L, like Lutheran or something. I can't remember.
Mm-hmm. Well, the best thing that could happen for her is that, since maybe they're not actually, I'm going to assume that they're not a married couple. So I said it. The best thing that could happen right now is for them to not make an association between, I don't think they're going to remember her. I think they put a handcuff on her, and so much has happened. So many people have died. She might go underground. They won't see her again. But the best thing that could happen is that they kind of leave Marva alone, because she's an older lady. They don't quite know her history, I have a feeling. And, maybe they think she's there and she adopted this kid or something. I don't know what they have on her, but we know that they know who he is. They have an old photo of him, which I'm guessing, Catherine, and this was something, maybe one of the most critical things about his history is it looks like it might have been a picture of him as not when he was a child, but maybe as a young adult. Do you remember if that was as a child or a young adult? And I'm guessing maybe they would have that photograph of him because as a child on that mining thing, maybe he was a child of one of the miners. The kids are wearing clothes that they salvaged, from maybe garbage piles on the mine, or from old miners who were there. When and where do you think that photo that they have of him was taken? It's kind of critical to know the point, because he looks very much like the picture, even though he's much younger in the picture. What do you think? Do you think that's...
I'm not sure, actually, because that's a good point, because we saw that he left the planet, the original planet, when he was very young. And I think from the picture, he was a little older than that by then, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Like a teenager.
Yeah. So I wonder if Marva kind of maybe gave him some cover identity initially, and that's where they have the photo, and then Cassian, as he grew up, decided, no, I'm not going to go by that anymore. I'm going to go by my own name. I'm going to take off and do my own thing. Because we still don't even know, like, why was he looking for his sister in the beginning? It's like, is it just because he found out she was in a brothel and wanted to get her out, or is it because he had some type of scam or something was going on? Because now that he's kind of abandoned that, plot thread, if you will, he's taken off with Stellan, and I take it she's going to catch up to them at some point, and something's going to happen there, because we didn't get any inkling of Cassian having any family anymore during Rogue One. So that'll be interesting to see. And at this point in the Empire, it's 14 years after Revenge of the Sith. So they're 14 years into it. We see that they're a bit bumbling and incompetent, and they're still trying to get their bearings. So I could see maybe because of that, he's able to slip through the cracks a bit as well. And because, like you said, that security that they have on that planet for the locals that the Empire is oblivious to also helps him, slip under the radar a bit. So I am curious. So I do think that maybe that photo has something to do with a former cover identity. It's like, here, you don't use this if you don't have to, but if you get caught, like, here's this. And so we'll see.
Now, my final question to you, or at least one of my final questions, is the Makari. It seems like no one has heard of Makari. But the Empire, or at least let's say these security units, seem to know about this planet. And, they almost Marva almost indicated that when the recovery ship comes for what's left, that everybody on the planet will be killed. And now I'm almost suspecting that we know that that's not what happened to the survivors who were on Makari. Perhaps they were relocated or something like that. He wouldn't be looking for his sister. if he didn't think that there were Makari survivors somewhere.
Oh,
So
that's a good. I didn't even think about that actually. I was thinking that by sister it was like maybe an adoptive sister, like Marva, maybe Marva's daughter, like grew up together. I wasn't thinking that it might be a sister from That's interesting. Okay, that might be it too. Because again, they're clearly something special. It's not just simply that that ship crashed there that they're gonna kill. It's like there was something going on there, some specific mining operation. Is it maybe are they mining kyber crystals there? I don't know. So we'll see. That's a good question because Marva was very terrified about the idea of them finding out where he came from, and it's like, well, if she's terrified, that seems to suggest that maybe you're right. Maybe they were all killed or relocated to slave labor camps or something. The question is why, and what is that past of his? How is that going to tie into what's going on? And so that's what I like. It's like there's so many different storylines and plot threads that there's more to invest in. Unlike, say, The Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett, where it's like, adventure of the week. There's so many different lines of thought that you could follow here. This feels more like the first 3 episodes. It's sort of like the first 20 minutes of a film script, where traditionally you have the first 20 pages of your script to introduce everybody, set up your stories, and then at the 20-minute mark, about 20 pages in, that's when the inciting event is going to happen, which is finally going to set your characters off on whatever adventure they're going to take. And that's kind of what the first 3 episodes of this show accomplished.
Absolutely. And like you, I'm thrilled with what we've seen. And certainly it has been a lot to discuss in regards to plot lines, in regards to character development, the relationships that we've seen. I also wanted to mention that I felt that the series overall, the production quality looks beautiful. The sound was wonderful. Every gun firing, every laser firing, every sort of ship flying in and out of what we were seeing. Even the speeder that they're on sounded real. There's so much that they thought of. The composition, the music in it also was intoxicating. The decision to have certain scenes coincide with one another. At the end of episode 3, I thought was very clever. There was one moment in his life that changed his life, and now this is another moment where his life is changing. And to put the 2 scenes together, I thought was a very interesting way to look at things. He's moving on. I'm not sure if he's ever going to see Marva again, but it doesn't matter because now we know that there is someone who might be taking over for that role for him. And we also know we're also going to be seeing Mon Mothma in the next episode. Coruscant, perhaps we're going to see Coruscant again now in a different way. We did kind of see a little bit of it in the prequels. Well, not a little bit of it. We saw a good portion of it. And we also saw some in some of the animated series. Of course, animation is going to look different, but to be honest with you, Catherine, what I'm seeing from the trailer, the quality looks much better than what I've seen in the prequels of some of this stuff. What are you looking forward to seeing how Coruscant may be portrayed going forward?
Well, it doesn't surprise me that it's better because they've had 20 years of better visual effects work, and the volume stuff is just magnificent. I've seen other movies that they're using it on that I wasn't even aware of that looks absolutely stunning. So looking at it here, some of it might also be a combination set. Like, for instance, in Attack of the Clones, the exterior of the nightclub that Obi-Wan and Anakin rush into when they have that brief chase on the ground, that was a set that they built. And then they had some, like, ships flying in the air would be digital or whatever after that. But I thought even the chase scene through Coruscant and the vehicles actually looked pretty good in episode 2, possibly because it was dark and the lighting, because lighting is key when it gets to CG, because the rest of that movie just looks awful, and the 4K transfer looks worse because the effects don't hold up with 4K res. The Blu-ray from 2011 I think looks better, but here I think the fact that this looks like they built a lot of sets. There was only maybe one time in Andor during one of the establishing shots of Morlanda 1 where one of the cargo ships is flying by, then look, maybe you can use a little bit more render time, but for the most part it looked great. It looked real. And like actual, it was actual sets, and they did build actual sets for this. They went a bit further into it. It wasn't just volume, because as we know, the visual effects industry is under a lot of strain right now, so they can't really afford to do everything on the volume. You're kind of being forced to, build real sets, which is actually really cool. And it doesn't have that, backlot feel that Kenobi had, because Kenobi, part of that show just looked really cheap. Like the whole show, the first showdown between Obi-Wan and Vader on the mining planet, it looked like they were on a sound stage where they had just maybe draped black curtains in the back to mimic the night. It just looked really. I couldn't put my finger on why. It just looked really cheap. I mean, even the Mandalorian season one did a better job at building what was it, that town where Grief Karga lived. That is such more real. Whereas here, it feels real as well. So I guess that because the effects industry is under strain, that it's kind of like, pick your battles. And this show it's very much better honed in. So I'm looking forward to, if they do go to Coruscant. I haven't seen the preview for the next episode yet, but I think that'll probably be really fun to see, especially if you go to what I think to be the most interesting aspect of Coruscant is the underground, like deep into the bowels of it, like the whole Blade Runner-esque world or the Fifth Element world, if you will, like really cool stuff to see there.
Yeah, it does have a Blade Runner. I would even say cyberpunk feel. Something, Catherine. The final thing I wanted to ask is about Mon Mothma herself. And you've seen the trailer and the previews, and I haven't ever seen a character that looks so polished. She looks almost perfect. In other words, her clothing is impeccable. I mean, it's not. I'm not saying like money wise. I'm just saying the way her clothing fits her, the way that she carries herself, her hair, everything from head to toe on her looks perfect. I don't think I've ever really seen a character like this in Star Wars before. Is she, maybe one of the most extraordinary characters they've portrayed, so far now? I mean, we've seen one of the first characters we were ever introduced to was Mon Mothma, and this was while she was giving the famous debriefing that we all know about. But honestly, Catherine, seeing her in sort of the halls of Coruscant in the Senate, she almost has this ethereal look about her. What is it about Mon Mothma that makes her shine like this, Catherine? Because I don't see many characters that look like that.
Yeah, probably not since Queen Amidala in Phantom Menace, but I'm not really sure. I didn't pick up on it as much, but I know they're using the same actress, and she certainly is. I think maybe she has more of a, because we don't really learn much about, or haven't learned much about her role in the Senate. We know of her, of course, from the Rebel Alliance, but what exactly is her role? Like her role in terms of how much respect does she have there? Because, like you said, she's clearly not somebody who's just going to blend in the hallway. Like, she sticks out. She must have some type of extra command, if you will. And she was in the 3 deleted scenes of Revenge of the Sith as being starting the rebellion with Amidala. And it's like, okay, so there's something more to this character. And frankly, I think they could develop her a lot more, because we haven't really gotten to see her much. Like, the briefing from Return of the Jedi. She showed up in a couple of the animated shows briefly, but still in that same kind of, briefing type role. So it would be nice to see her, on Imperial turf for a change, to see, okay, this is obviously a duplicitous character because she's starting a Rebel Alliance, if you will. But what is she like there? And the fact that, like you said, she does kind of stick out like a sore thumb. So wonder what that's about. Is she trying to maybe get certain people's attention? So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. As I said, I've never seen a character like this before in that setting. And you're right, we haven't seen anything like that since Amidala, who was very, very young, right? She was a young girl.
Yeah.
Her family was in politics, right, Catherine?
Yeah, she was in politics, and granted that she was, the actress Natalie Portman was a lot, although it's noticeably older than the character was supposed to be, because the character's supposed to be like 14. I'm like, no, that's not a 14. But I've also noticed, even in the trailers, as far as wardrobe goes, it looks like the Stellan Skarsgård character is going to have a whole, like, a wide array of a wardrobe, more than we've seen since probably Queen Amidala, which is kind of interesting. And some of the stuff you see him wearing, I'm like, I wonder if these are disguises, or maybe he comes from money, because we really don't know anything about him yet either. Like, who are you? Where are you from? What are your goals? What are your resources? That kind of stuff. But yeah, so you're right. We haven't seen characters like that for a while, and I am interested in seeing Mon Mothma outside of the the Rebel War Room setting, because we really don't know much about her.
Yes, and even in those few short comments, she did have a certain grace about her. Clearly, she's what I would like to predict or say that she's probably a master negotiator, and is probably maybe one of the best in the galaxy. And it's not a surprise that she could sense what might be going on all along, like Amidala mentions verbally. This is how democracy dies, or whatever. I have a feeling that we have had a hint of Mon Mothma talking about what she's had to do and why. And so that was also very relevant. Now,
right, because that could be a really fascinating story to tell too. Is how did she end up uniting all of these different factions to form? Which is what I'm thinking. I mean, that could be what the story of Andor is, because it's 2 seasons, 24 episodes. Every 3 episodes is a year. So, and since they don't get their first victory to Rogue One, how did they come together for the first time? It's like, yes, we know Mon Mothma has been laying the seeds from the beginning, from episode 3 on. But how did they all come to meet on Yavin? And actually, that's a big step forward to actually do that. And they've never really paid much lip service to that. And that's kind of, I would be interested in seeing that, and maybe that's what we'll be learning from her on Coruscant. Because after all, if she's on Coruscant, she's probably not going to be she's not going to be flippantly mentioning things about the Rebel Alliance while she's walking through the halls of the Senate, of course.
Clearly not. She seems to be, and she almost seems to be in complete control, even though you and I both know that things are spiraling out of control in a sense, with a shift in power, so to speak. Slowly but surely, things are changing in a way that people may be resistant to this change, but it's supposed to be working in favor of the Empire, right? And she's aware of this shift, but I'm really intrigued by her character. I think that the presentation alone, Catherine, has been enjoyable, just even in the trailer of this character. So that's even more things to look forward to. So yes, I was thrilled with this series. Catherine, any last thoughts on episodes 1 through 3?
I think you're onto something when you said that this is clearly more mature Star Wars storytelling, and the fact that it does feel more like a movie or a long form series setting up all these different storylines and character arcs. Then I think that'd be great if they do that going forward. It's like, yes, you can have a more family friendly show like The Mandalorian, which adventure of the week, but I would love it if Andor is sort of signaling that no, we're going to have 2 different types of Star Wars shows from here on out. The type that's more mature and that we're the grittiness that we really want, and then the silly fan service stuff, the adventure of the week stuff over there. So I really hope that Andor continues on this trajectory. I think it will, because as we know, Tony Gilroy, who was brought in to rewrite and direct the 3rd act of Rogue One, and was very surprised to find Lucasfilm in as much of a mess with that movie as they were at the time. The fact that they convinced him to come back, and he's as a writer and is eager on this, it's like, okay, if he's given his stamp of approval, and he's actually written these episodes we've seen, because so far they had a new guy, Toby Haynes is the director so far, and I'm not familiar with him. So if you got Tony Gilroy's stamp of approval and you lured him back in after the mess that was going on in 2016, then I'm on board, and I trust that he's probably going to maintain that flow through the rest of the series.
Absolutely. And that is definitely something that I did not mention, or you and I hadn't spoken about, in regards to management and showrunners and the writers, just the production overall, who is going to be in charge, and the influence that they have on the feel of the show is certainly been a positive one. And the other thing that I was going to mention is that I have to congratulate the production team on making everything come to life so nicely. Such a wonderful balance. Even the rainy in the beginning, when he's walking on that, causeway, if you will, like a causeway platform to get to the other side, that felt very satisfying to see the rain, and kind of this, which would be a very traditional way of showing change in a story, or something's going to change immediately. You have this rain falling down in traditional literature, I guess. But honestly, that felt good. I think that this story kind of exudes these vibes of just a story that might be one of the best stories we've seen, and are really just going to have such a great time with this series. So, Catherine, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me Wednesday nights on the Phantasmagorium show. Currently, we are doing our Tarantino retrospective series. And you can also find me on every 2nd and 4th Sunday of the month on the Unifying Force Star Wars show on the Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel, where we talk about all things Star Wars, usually Star Wars philosophy. We're going to be reviewing Andor. And so that'll be really fun. And yeah, and you can find me at Twitter and Instagram /Snide.
Absolutely, guys. And of course, you know where to find me here on Positive Fandom and on the PGS. On behalf of everybody out there, guys, thank you for watching this show. Catherine and I are going to continue to review the Andor series as episodes come out. So certainly do come back and watch the rest of them. If you liked it, please do hit the like button. If you like the channel, subscribe. I appreciate you taking the time to watch these shows. But for everybody out there, always remember to please be kind and take care, everybody.